My name is Daniel Walker. For 7 years, I worked as a night security guard in one of Chicago's oldest commercial buildings. During the day, that building looked like an ordinary office building. Thousands of people would enter, work, evening would come, and they would return to their homes. But after 12 midnight, the building would completely change. People think security guards just sit around drinking coffee all night. I wish that were the case. Our job wasn't just catching thieves. Sometimes we checked whether things that shouldn't be inside were still inside. This is the first time I am telling this story, because after that night the company I worked for deleted all records. The police found nothing, and they told me only one sentence: "You will never go up to the 12th floor again." Problem was, officially that building only had 11 floors. This incident happened in November 2022. It gets dark early in Chicago. A fine snow was falling that night. I took over the shift at 7:30 in the evening. I followed the usual procedure. I checked the cameras. I tested the fire system. I went through the floors one by one. Everything seemed normal. The building I worked in was an old financial center built in the 1960s. During the day, about 2,000 people worked there. But at night, only 2 people remained in the building: me and the old security supervisor, Frank, sitting in the camera room. Frank had been in the same building for about 30 years. On our first night, he told me a strange rule. If someone is walking on the cameras after 3 at night, first look at the floor number. Why? If it says 12th floor, don't look at the camera again. I thought it was a joke. Frank never laughed. Months passed. No strange incidents occurred until the night of November 17th. It was exactly 03:07. While drinking coffee in the camera room, one of the monitors detected motion on its own. A red warning light started flashing. I looked at the screen. Someone was walking in the corridor. He was wearing a long black suit. I couldn't make out his face. My first reflex was to look at the floor number in the upper right corner of the screen. And at that moment, I dropped the coffee cup in my hand onto the floor. The floor written on the monitor was 12. As my coffee spilled onto the floor, I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. Floor 12. This was impossible. I knew the building's architectural plan by heart. The elevator buttons only went up to 11. The stairs also ended at the 11th floor. In official records, such a floor never existed. Yet it was clearly written on the monitor. Cam 12A. The man in the corridor continued walking slowly. He wasn't swinging his arms at all. As if he wasn't walking, he was gliding towards the floor. Just then the door of the camera room opened. Frank walked in. His face had turned pale white. He set the coffee thermos in his hand down on the table. Without looking at the screen, he asked me, "Did you see the floor number?" My throat choked up. 12. Frank closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. Then he looked at the monitor. The man in the corridor had stopped. He was looking directly at the camera. His face was still not visible, because even though there was light where he stood, the part where his face should be was completely dark. Frank immediately turned off the monitor. "Don't you dare turn it back on." Why? Because now he saw you too. I was starting to feel truly terrified for the first time. "Frank, what does this mean?" Frank didn't answer. He opened the desk drawer. He pulled out an old key from inside. Only a single number was written on the key. 12. What is this key for? Frank stayed silent for a long time. Then he whispered, "I don't know either. Been carrying it in my pocket for 30 years, because the security guard before me gave this to me before he died." Right at that moment, all the monitors started static flickering at the same time. They were turning off and back on one by one. Finally, all the screens began showing the same image, even though they were supposed to show different floors. Now they all had the same corridor, and the same man on 12 different cameras. He was walking at the same time. Frank's hand started trembling. It was obvious he was seeing something like this for the first time. Then the building's radio system activated on its own. A metallic voice came from the speaker. "Security to floor 12. We both froze because the building's announcement system was making a call to a place that had no floor number. Then came the second announcement. This time the voice was my voice. "Daniel, come upstairs." The moment I heard my own voice from the speaker, my blood ran cold. Frank looked at me too. We had both realized the same thing. I hadn't made that sound, but the words, the intonation, my breathing, belonged entirely to me. Static came from the speaker for a few seconds. Then the same voice spoke again. "Daniel, come alone." Frank quickly grabbed the radio. Dispatch, do you copy? There was only static. I pulled out my cell phone. There was no signal. Even though we were in the middle of the building, it wasn't catching even a single bar. Frank pulled a small notebook out of his pocket. Its pages had yellowed with the effect of years. He opened the first page. Written on top in capital letters was only this: rules of the 12th floor. My throat choked up. Is there really a floor like that? Frank slowly nodded his head. I don't know. The rules are real. He handed me the notebook. I read the first item. 1. If your own voice calls you, do not answer. Second item. 2. If you see your face on the cameras, that is not you. When I read the third item, my hand started trembling. 3. If doors are knocked on before 0313, do not open them right at that moment. Knock, knock, knock. The door of the camera room was knocked on 3 times. We both froze. I looked at my watch. 03:11. Frank whispered without looking at me. Move a muscle. Door was knocked on again. It was harder this time. Knock, knock, knock. Then a voice came from outside. Frank. Frank's face turned pale white because the voice outside was Frank's own voice. I couldn't even take a breath. The voice outside spoke again. Is Daniel inside? Open the door. Frank slowly shook his head side to side. His eyes were filled with fear. This is not possible, he whispered, because I am already inside. A shadow slowly began to appear under the door, but the shadow was not of a single person. As if right outside the door, dozens of people were waiting silently. There were no footsteps. There was no sound of breathing. There were only shadows. Right at that moment, the speaker on the ceiling operated one last time. This time, dozens of different voices were speaking simultaneously, but the sentence they said was the same. 12th floor is waiting for you. At that moment, all the lights in the building went out. We remained in complete darkness for about 3 seconds. When the emergency lights came on, the shadows in front of the door were gone, but on all the monitors in the security cameras, now there was only a single image: me. I was walking in the corridor, and in the upper right corner of the screen there was that same text again, floor 12. I froze, locked onto the monitors. The person on the screen was me. Same uniform, same radio, same flashlight. Even the keys on my belt were hung in the exact same order. The only difference: I was standing in the camera room, while the me on the screen was walking in the corridor with heavy steps. Frank suddenly pulled the plug on one of the monitors. The screen went dark. A second later, it turned back on by itself. The same image returned. He turned off the second monitor. That one turned on too. Finally, he cut the power to all the monitors. All the screens in the room went dark at the same time. I took a deep breath. Just when I thought I was relieved, I saw a reflection in the glass of the dark monitors: me and Frank, but there was a small difference in the reflection. The person standing next to Frank wasn't me. The man who looked like me slowly turned his head towards me. I hadn't moved, yet the reflection was smiling. Frank noticed this too. He turned around. There was no one. We looked back at the monitor glass. The reflection was still there, and this time, the reflection's lips moved. 0313. By reflex, I looked at my watch. Right at that moment, the time became 0313. The door of the camera room opened by itself. The corridor was completely dark. Ice cold air came from inside. Frank suddenly swore, "We're late." "What do you mean we're late?" He didn't answer. He grabbed a flashlight. He handed one to me as well. "Now it's coming here." "Who?" Frank slowly looked into the corridor. "The one coming out of the 12th floor." My throat choked up. "Frank, is there really a floor like that?" This time he looked at me. The expression on his face still doesn't leave my mind, because he was about to cry as he said this. "Daniel, the 12th floor is not a place." "Then what is it?" Frank didn't answer. He pointed to the end of the corridor. The emergency exit door about 50 meters ahead opened slowly. Someone stepped out from inside. He had a flashlight in his hand. He was wearing a security uniform, my uniform. He began walking towards us with heavy steps. The moment I could make out his face, my knees gave way, because the person coming towards us was my corpse. My legs gave out. The thing in front of me was me, but not the living me. My face was pale. My eyes were open. On the right side of my neck there was a deep blackened wound. My security uniform was soaked in blood. The radio on my belt was broken. The flashlight I held in my hand was still shining. The corpse was walking towards us slowly. There were no footsteps. Only the light of the flashlight swayed slowly on the floor. Frank's breathing quickened. "No, It wasn't supposed to be this early. What do you mean early? Frank didn't answer. He grabbed me by the arm. Run. We both started running down the corridor. We didn't look back, but there was no sound of footsteps coming from behind us. That was the most terrifying thing. Someone was following us, but making no sound at all. We reached the stairs. Frank opened the door leading to 11. The door wouldn't open. He tried once more. It still wouldn't open. Writing I had never seen before had appeared on the door. Access denied. Frank pulled out the old key with 12 written on it from his pocket. With trembling hands, he inserted it into the lock. As soon as the key turned, the text on the door changed. Now I could read this. Welcome back. The door opened slowly, but there were no stairs behind it. A long, dimly lit, never-ending corridor was there. Dozens of old security cameras were mounted on both sides of the walls. All of their red recording lights were lit. A single door was visible at the end of the corridor. On the door were large metal numbers 12. I stood there, frozen. Frank bowed his head. He spoke in a whisper. 32 years. Every night I tried to keep this door closed. It's your turn. I couldn't understand what he was saying. Turn for what? Frank looked at me. There was acceptance in his eyes. He was tired, so tired. Then he took his security ID out of his pocket. He left it in my palm. There was a small writing on the back of the ID head of Floor 12 Security Frank. What is this? He smiled painfully. I wasn't a security supervisor. I was the guard of the 12th floor. Right at that moment, the door at the end of the corridor opened by itself. The sound of hundreds of monitors working at the same time began coming from inside, and the same sentence echoed from all the speakers. The new security guard has started duty. Sentence coming from the speaker continued to echo off the walls of the corridor. The new security guard has started duty. Frank bowed his head, as if the moment he had been waiting for years had finally arrived. I'm sorry, Daniel. There was no other way to explain this to you. Explain what? Frank took a deep breath. Security guards of this building never guarded the building. We prevented the 12th floor from coming outside. At that moment, hundreds of footsteps were heard from behind the door at the end of the corridor. At first they were far away, then they began getting closer and closer. Hundreds of people were walking at the same time, but none of them were talking. Frank squeezed the key into my palm. Close the door. What about you? Forget about me. Close the door. I ran toward the door. I pulled the door with all my strength. Just as it was about to close, I saw the inside one last time, inside the corridor. Hundreds of security guards were standing. They were all wearing uniforms from different years. Some of their clothes were left over from the 1970s. Some were much newer. They all had name cards on their chests, and right at the front, Frank was standing. No, not the Frank beside me, a younger version of him. Then next to him, I saw my own face. But I had aged. My hair was completely white. On the card on my chest, the following was written: Daniel Walker, head of Floor 12 Security. I closed the door in fear. I turned the lock. Everything went quiet. A few seconds later, I turned around. The corridor was gone. I found myself back in the normal stairwell. Frank was gone too, as if he had never existed. When the police arrived in the morning, they searched the building from top to bottom. They couldn't find Frank. There was also something interesting in the company records. A security guard named Frank Morrison had indeed worked there, but he had gone missing while on duty in 1992, exactly 30 years ago. Yet I thought I had been working with that man for 3 years. The next day, I submitted my resignation. I never went to that building again. 6 months later, I learned the building had been demolished. A luxury residence was built in its place. I thought everything was over until an anonymous envelope arrived in my mailbox last winter. A single key came out of it. On it was written only 12. Along with the key there was a small note. In the note only this sentence was written: your night shift starts tonight at 03:13. The moment I read that note, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered. I heard only one sentence from the other side: Daniel. Motion detected on the cameras. And then I heard that voice again, my own voice. Welcome to the 12th floor. My name is Michael Reynolds. For about 10 years, I worked as a night security guard at a large shopping mall in Seattle. People think malls are completely empty at night. Actually, the building is empty. But the cameras are never empty. Every night, I would watch hundreds of cameras. I watched tens of thousands of hours of footage. There were times I noticed a thief, a fire, or even an earthquake on the cameras before anyone else. But one night, one of the cameras showed me something that at first, I thought it was a system glitch. Then I thought it was an editing error in the end. I realized that the person I saw on the monitor was watching me. The problem wasn't that, the problem was that camera hadn't been installed yet. This incident happened in February 2023 in Seattle. The rain almost never stops. That night, there was a fine rain too. I took over the shift at 8 in the evening. As usual, I checked all the cameras one by one. There were 186 security cameras in total. All of them were working. I sent a report to Central Dispatch. The night had started quietly. At 02:41, a new window opened in the camera system. In the bottom right corner of the screen, a camera appeared that I had never seen before. Cam 187. I frowned. We didn't have a camera numbered 187. I immediately opened the system logs. It didn't appear on the list either. But the live feed was open. Curiosity got the better of me. I made the video full screen. The camera was showing the security room, meaning the room I was in. At first, I thought there was a hidden camera inside, but there was a strange detail in the image. The me on the monitor wasn't drinking coffee, even though at that exact moment I had brought my coffee cup to my mouth. The Michael on the screen was just looking at me and was slowly smiling. The coffee cup in my hand froze in midair. The man on the monitor was me. There was not the slightest doubt about it. Same uniform, same hair, same face. But his movements were not the same as mine. While I looked at the screen without even taking a breath, he slowly straightened up from his chair. Then he tilted his head slightly to the side as if he was examining me. By reflex, I turned around. There was no one else in the security room besides me. I looked at the monitor again. The Michael on the screen was still looking at me. Then he slowly raised his right hand and waved at me. I hadn't moved. My heart began to beat rapidly. I immediately opened the system menu. I checked Cam 187's information screen. Camera model, unknown location, unavailable installation date, pending, caught my breath, pending installation. In other words, the system was saying this camera hadn't been installed yet. But I was watching its live feed. Right at that moment, static came from my radio. Michael, it was the voice of the central supervisor, Olivia. Just saw you in the camera room. What happened? Who were you waving at? My throat choked up. I didn't wave at anyone. There was silence on the other end, then Olivia spoke slowly. You sure? Yes, because I saw you waving on the cameras. At that moment, I looked at the monitor. The hand of the Michael on the screen was still in the air, but now my hand was in the air too without realizing it. I was mimicking his movement. In fear, I lowered my hand. The Michael on the monitor did not lower his. He was still smiling. Then his lips moved. There was no sound coming through, but I could clearly read what he said. It's your turn. Right at that moment, the door of the security room slowly closed behind me. Click. I hadn't closed the door. The sound of the door locking echoed through the whole room. By reflex, I ran to the door. I pushed the handle down. It didn't open. I scanned my keycard. The red light turned on. Access denied. This was impossible. I was the only person authorized to open that door. I tried again, the same warning. A soft clicking sound came from behind me. I slowly turned around. Cam 187 was still open, but the image had changed. It was no longer showing the security room. It was showing the corridor. At the end of the corridor was the door to the security room, and in front of the door, I was standing. No, not me. The other Michael from the monitor. He reached his hand out to the door handle. He turned it slowly. Right at that moment, the door handle of the room I was in went down on its own. I caught my breath. The door was opening from the outside, 1 centimeter, 2 centimeters. It cracked open slowly. I looked into the corridor. There was no one. But the door had opened completely. I turned back to the monitor. The Michael on the screen was now inside the room. He was walking towards the camera with heavy steps. The smile on his face was growing bigger. Finally, he stopped right in front of the camera. He leaned in toward the lens, and for the first time sound came through. It was heavily distorted. Through the static I could make out a single sentence. "You haven't returned yet," I frowned. "Where to?" I whispered involuntarily. Right at that moment, the Michael on the monitor answered me. "To yourself." The moment I heard this, the monitor went dark. All screens shut off at the same time. The security room went completely silent. Only the faint hum of the UPS devices could be heard. About 5 seconds later, the system turned back on. All 186 cameras came back, but now they were all showing the same image, me. Sitting in the camera room. However, on every screen I was at a different date. On one monitor my hair was completely white, on another my face was covered in blood, on another my uniform was torn. On one screen I was sitting in the chair, but my head was not on my shoulders. At that moment a metallic voice rose from all the speakers simultaneously, playing recording. A date fell onto the top right corner of the screens, the date I was currently in, February 14, 2023, but the dates on the monitors, 2027, 2031, 2039, 2046. And on the last screen there was only a single date. UNKNOW, and I couldn't take my eyes off the screens. In every monitor it was me. But each one showed a different end to my life. 2027, 2028, 2029, 2030, and unknown. The monitor at the very bottom was different from the others. Instead of a date, it only said unknown. The image wasn't clear like the others either. It was constantly glitching with static. I slowly approached that monitor. The Michael on the screen was sitting in a dark room. I couldn't make out his face. I could only hear his breathing. Suddenly, he raised his head. His face was completely shrouded in darkness, but his eyes were looking at me from inside the camera. Then a muffled voice came from the monitor's speaker. "Michael, come closer." Normally, I should have backed away, but it was as if something was pulling me. Unintentionally, I walked toward the screen. There were only a few centimeters left between us. The Michael on the screen approached me at the exact same time. Now our faces were almost face to face on opposite sides of the monitor. Then he raised his finger from the other side of the glass and touched the inner surface of the screen at the exact same spot. A fingerprint formed on the outer surface of the monitor. I caught my breath. He had touched it from the inside. By reflex, I jumped back. The monitor began to crack. Thin cracks spread like a spider web. Then the screen went completely black. An alarm sounded from behind me. It wasn't a fire alarm. Wasn't a burglar alarm either. It was an alarm I was hearing for the first time in my life. I looked at the control panel. A single warning was flashing in red letters. "Camera breach detected. Camera breach." I didn't know what this meant. Right at that moment, Olivia shouted over the radio, "Michael, where are you?" "I'm in the camera room." There was silence on the other end. Then she shouted in fear, "No, you're not there." "I'm looking at the camera room right now." My blood froze. "What are you saying?" Are walking in the kids' play area on the second floor. My throat choked up. "Olivia, I never left the room." "No, Michael. I'm watching you live right now." Right as she said this, I saw a reflection in the glass of the security room door. Someone was standing in the corridor. I turned around slowly. The corridor was empty. I looked at the glass again. The reflection was still there, but this time, the person in the corridor wasn't looking at me. He was standing behind me and slowly extending his hand toward my shoulder. I clearly saw the hand extending toward my shoulder in the reflection on the glass. By reflex, I leaped forward. At the same time, I turned around. There was no one. The room was completely empty. I looked at the glass on the door again. The reflection had vanished too. Just as I was about to take a deep breath, I felt a weight on my shoulder, as if someone had actually placed their hand on my shoulder. I froze. I slowly looked down. There was no hand, but the shoulder portion of my uniform was sunken inward as if being held by fingers. Then the pressure vanished all at once. The radio static flickered again. This time Olivia was whispering, "Michael, don't look behind you." My heart sped up. "On the cameras, someone is standing right behind you." The moment I heard this sentence, all the monitors in the security room turned back on at the same time. On all 186 screens, there was the exact same image, me, and the tall black silhouette standing behind me. I couldn't see it, but the cameras could see it. The silhouette's face wasn't visible where its head should be. There was only darkness. Then it slowly leaned down. It whispered something in my ear. I didn't hear anything, but that whisper was heard from the monitor's speakers. We are switching places, right at that moment. All screens went dark for a second, then the image came back, but this time, the person the cameras were showing wasn't me. I was inside the monitor. I was looking at the security room from behind the screen in the real world. The thing standing in my place looked like me. It sat in my chair. It picked up my coffee cup. It began checking the monitors just like I did every night. I began pounding my fists against the glass from inside the monitor. I was shouting. No sound came out. The Michael outside slowly turned to the camera. He smiled and picked up the radio. Olivia's voice came through. "Michael, is everything okay?" I was screaming. "No, not here." But the thing outside answered calmly. "Everything is normal, Olivia." Olivia didn't suspect a thing. "Have a good shift." Radio went silent. At that moment, a small text appeared in the top right corner of the monitor. "Recording saved successfully," and underneath it, Cam 187. Inside the screen, I was helplessly pounding my fists. My voice wouldn't reach outside. While the Michael on the other side of the glass had begun living my life. He got up from my chair. He picked up the family photo on my desk. He looked at the photo for a long time, then he smiled just like I used to. At that moment I understood this thing didn't just look like me, it was trying to be me. For about 10 minutes I watched him from inside the monitor. Olivia came to the security room. She opened the door. She walked in. She looked at the fake Michael. "Are you okay?" "Yes." "You look a bit pale." "I'm tired." Olivia smiled. "Get some rest when you get off in the morning." She hadn't understood anything. I was screaming from inside the monitor. I was pounding on the glass. She could neither see me nor hear me. Then fake Michael took my ID out of his pocket. He showed it to Olivia. The two of them walked out of the room together. The door closed. I was left alone inside the monitor. I don't know how much time passed. Hours, maybe days, maybe years. Inside the monitor, time flowed differently. After a while, I started seeing other screens. I wasn't alone. There were people inside other monitors as well. A female police officer, a hospital nurse, a night watchman, a bus driver. They were all asking for help from behind the glass. They were all watching their lives outside being lived by others. That was when I understood the truth. Cam 187 wasn't a security camera. It was a switching room. Months later, the fake Michael outside moved into my home. He continued going to my job. He lived my life flawlessly. I watched this from inside the monitor. No one noticed because he was now a better me than I was. A year later, a new employee started working at the security company. He was a young kid. It was his first night shift. Fake Michael was showing him the system. Then a new window opened on one of the monitors. Cam 188. The young kid frowned. "Do we have a camera numbered 188? Fake Michael just smiled, just like he had looked at me on the first night. "Don't worry. Hasn't been installed yet." Kid opened the feed out of curiosity. On the monitor, he saw his own security room, and inside the camera, he was sitting. Right at that moment, the screen turned to me. For the first time, fake Michael saw me. He smiled. He pointed his finger at the new employee on the screen. Then he whispered to me, "Now it's his turn." Screen went dark, and one last recording message appeared in the top right corner. Cam 188. Initialized. That day I understood. I was never lost. I was simply converted into a security camera. My name is Adam Carter. For 8 years, I worked as a night security guard at a private research facility in the middle of the Arizona desert. That facility didn't even appear on maps. Its perimeter was surrounded by miles of barbed wire fences. Phones had no signal. There was no internet. Our only connection to the outside world was the radio. On my first day at work, they didn't give me a gun. Instead, they gave me a thick black folder. Only this was written on the cover of the folder. Night shift rules. The first rule was this: between 03:00 and 03:15, if you see yourself on the security cameras, leave your location immediately. I thought this was a psychological test, until one night I saw myself on the cameras. The problem wasn't that. The problem was, at that moment the cameras weren't supposed to be showing me. This incident happened in September 2021. Arizona was scorching hot during the day, but at night it would turn ice cold in the desert. The facility I worked at consisted of three main buildings, Block A, Block B, and the one everyone avoided talking about, Block C. They told me only one thing about Block C. You will only enter there if the alarm goes off. If the alarm doesn't go off, you will never approach it. The first 6 months, no extraordinary incidents occurred. Every shift was the same: patrol, camera check, doors, report. That was all. Then the night of September 24th arrived. At exactly 0304, one of the monitors in the control room detected motion. The warning was coming from Block C. The alarm hadn't gone off. There was only a motion alert. I opened the camera. The corridor was completely empty. Just as I was about to close the window, someone walked in the furthest corner of the camera. I zoomed in. I caught my breath. The person walking in the corridor was me. Furthermore, at that exact moment, I was sitting in front of the monitor in the control room. I froze for a few seconds, staring at the monitor. The person walking in the corridor was me. Same security uniform, same flashlight, same name tag. Even the text Adam Carter on my chest was legible. The first thing I thought was that the camera recordings were replaying. I immediately looked at the timestamp at the bottom of the screen. Live. It was a live feed. The date was showing today as well. The time, 0304:17. By reflex, I looked at my own watch. 0304:17. It was identical down to the second. My throat choked up right at that moment. The me on the monitor stopped. He slowly raised his head. He looked directly at the camera. Then, without moving out of the camera's field of view, he raised his hand. He greeted me. I hadn't moved, but involuntarily my right hand twitched, as if my brain wanted to imitate his movement. I stopped it by shoving my hand into my pocket. I remembered the black folder given on the first day. I opened the desk drawer and pulled out the folder. I flipped through the pages quickly. Rule 7. If you see yourself on the cameras, do not wave under any circumstances. Underneath it, there was a single sentence written in red ink. It is not imitating you. My blood froze. I looked at the monitor again. The Adam on the screen was no longer walking. He was just looking at me. Then very slowly, he shook his head side to side, as if he didn't approve of what I did. Right at that moment, there were 3 knocks on the door of the control room. Knock, knock, knock. A chill went down my spine. No one else was patrolling at that hour on the night shift at the facility. I approached the door. Who's there? Silence. They knocked again, slower this time. Knock, knock, knock. I looked outside through the door's small peephole. The corridor was empty. There was no one at all. Just as I was about to turn back, a face appeared at the bottom of the glass. It slowly rose upward. It was me. The person outside the door had my face, but he wasn't smiling. He just moved his lips. There was no sound coming through. I could read what he said from his lips. Open the door. At the same time, the other Adam on the monitor in the control room said the exact same sentence. Again, there was no sound. Again, I could read it from his lips. Both of them at the same time. Open the door. I took a step back. My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. The me outside the door wasn't moving at all. The me on the monitor was looking at me in the exact same way. Both of them smiled at the same time. Right at that moment, my radio static flickered. Adam. It was the night shift supervisor, Harris. Harris, there's someone in front of the control room. Who? Me. There was a few seconds of silence on the other end. Then his voice took on a serious tone. You dare open the door. I'm coming to you. How long will it take? 3 minutes. Just as I was about to answer, Harris's voice came from the radio again, but this time much closer. Adam. I raised my head. The sound was coming from the corridor, from right behind the door. Open the door. I caught my breath. The Harris on the radio continued to speak. Adam, no matter what happens, do not open the door. 2 different Harrises were speaking at the same time. One was on the radio. The other was behind the door. I didn't know which one was real. At that moment, the black folder came to my mind again. I flipped through the pages rapidly. Rule 11. If you hear 2 voices of the same person at the same time, lean against the wall and do not close your eyes. Just as I was reading this, the lights in the control room began to flicker 1, 2, 3 times. Then they went out completely. The emergency lights turned on. The inside of the room was illuminated with a red light. I looked at the monitors. Now only one screen was working, the Block C camera. The person walking in the corridor was still me. But he was no longer alone. Behind him, about 10 more people were walking. All of them had my face. Some were old, some were young. One's face was covered in blood, one was missing an arm, one's security uniform was burned. They were all walking in the same direction with heavy steps. At the end of the corridor there was a large metal door. A single word was written on it. Archive. Right at that moment, the me outside the door spoke again. This time I heard his voice clearly. Adam, we're running late. The same sentence came from the monitor behind me as well. Adam, we're running late. Then, both of them turned their heads toward me at the same time and whispered simultaneously, you're still on your first night. The moment I heard that sentence, my brain felt like it had stopped. Still on your first night. What do you mean first night? I shouted. The me outside the door didn't answer. The me on the monitor slowly pulled out a black folder from his pocket. It was the exact same folder I was holding in my hand. He raised it toward the camera. Then he opened the first page. When I zoomed in, I could read the title, Night Shift RULES, Revision 48. I froze. On the folder in my hand, it only said Revision 1 on his. Revision meant at least 47 people had experienced the same things before me. The Adam on the monitor began turning the pages. On every page there were different names. Revision 12, Thomas Reed. Revision 19, Eric Collins. Revision 27, Stephen Hall. Then he reached the last page. A single name was written there. Revision 49, Adam Carter. My throat choked up. The last page of the folder was still blank. Right at that moment, the me outside the door spoke. They couldn't succeed. Who? The ones before. What couldn't they do? This time the Adam on the monitor answered, return to our place. Metallic alarm sound rose from the ceiling of the control room. It was the strangest alarm I had ever heard in my life. A red warning appeared on the computer screen. Identity conflict detected, and underneath, a countdown had started. 00, 5900, 5857. My breathing quickened. What is this? The Adam on the monitor looked scared for the first time. He started yelling, quick, make a choice. What choice? If you stay inside, both of us will be erased. Just as he said this, the Adam outside the door burst into laughter. It was the first time he smiled. Then he pulled out his security card from his pocket. My photo was on the card, but the start date, September 14, 1989, whereas I had started working in 2021. All at once, all the monitors turned back on. This time it wasn't Block C. All the cameras in the facility were visible, and on every camera, there was a different Adam Carter, a total of 48. All of them were looking at me at the same time then. All 48 of them said the exact same sentence simultaneously. Which one of us is real? A deathly silence fell inside the control room. The 48 Adams on the screens were looking at me. None of them were blinking. The countdown was continuing. 00, 1800, 1700, 16. I still didn't know what I was supposed to do. Right at that moment, the last page of the black folder in my hand opened on its own. On the page that was blank just a moment ago, there was text now. At the top, the following was written in capital letters. Revision 49 completed, and underneath, a single sentence. Original personnel could not be identified. My blood froze. Not even the system knew which one of us was real anymore. All the Adams on the monitors stood up at the same time. They all started walking toward the cameras then. One by one, they began stepping out from inside the screens. No, literally out of the screens. It was as if the monitor glass had turned to water. The first Adam stepped out. Then the second, the third. Within minutes, there were dozens of Adam Carters outside the control room. All of them had my face. All of them were wearing the same security uniform. All of them were looking at me at the same time. The first Adam outside the door smiled. Now the choice is over. Choice? Which one of us gets to stay outside? Right at that moment, the final warning appeared on the computer screen. Identity verified underneath. A single name was written. Adam Carter. I took a deep breath. So the real one is me. Just as I thought this. A second line opened in small letters beneath the screen. Location. See Block Archive. My throat choked up. I was not in the control room. I slowly looked around myself. The walls had begun to change. The red emergency lights, the old concrete walls, the rusty shelves. All of them were gradually revealing themselves. I had never seen the real control room. All along I had been in the archive room. The control room I saw on the monitors was the real world. The atom outside the door looked at me one last time. Then he slowly closed the door. Just before the door closed, he said only a single sentence. "Have a good shift." Metal door locked. The lights went out completely. When morning came, the facility management declared me missing. The official report read as follows: Officer Adam Carter went missing without a trace during his night patrol. Case was closed. 2 years later, the facility was completely evacuated. No one ever used Block C again. Last year, I stumbled upon a video on the internet by urban explorers touring the facility. My heart nearly stopped while watching the video, because when they turned their cameras to the archive room, lined up along the wall were dozens of old monitors. Only one of the monitors was working. In its upper right corner was a small writing, Cam 49 on the screen. I was sitting. My security uniform was still on me. I looked at the camera. I slowly smiled. And my lips formed a single sentence: shift never ends.